Okay, we're going to take a look at another way to use web forms as an alternative for doing data entry. So it's more of an internal way of adding data with less clicks. So maybe you want to enter multiple contacts, add an activity, but do it all on one screen. The scenario we're going to use is we're going to create an internal intake form. So staff is actually talking with somebody on the phone or meeting in person, and they don't want to click around so much, so they want to enter it all in one form. Contact information. They also want to maybe be able to look up, do a quick search and pull up the information and edit it if the person exists. They could do it right there on the same form. They can still add the activity. We want to make sure there's email notifications that get sent out to staff so that they know the intake was taken. Um, so we're going to take a look at these different things. We'll also take a look at the permissions because we don't want just anybody entering the form. Only staff, only folks that have logins and permissions can actually enter on that form. So slightly a different way of using web forms, but all the concepts are still the same. Still have to create the custom fields if needed and activities and all that. So let's take a look. First let's go to the fields so you can see that I created, since this is an intake, I'm going to call it our helpline intake activity. I created my activity. Again, it's under custom data and screens, activity types. I call it my helpline intake. So I know this is intake. I created fields that are exposed just for that activity type. So under custom data and screens and custom fields, I created the fields I needed under this. It's all under this helpline questions, which is obviously, if you look here, it extends activities of two different types of activities, a helpline and submission. But in this case, my helpline intake, if I view and edit the custom fields, you can see all the fields I've created here that are going to be useful. So I have all that. Contact information is already there. So I can go ahead now and we're going to take a look. I set this up already just to get it started. So if I go to Administer, Drupal Administration, and if I go to Content, you can see all the web forms. And there are other screencasts that show you how to create basic web forms, so you can take a look at those. But let's take a look at this intake web form. I'm going to click on Edit, and I'm going to show you what I did. So the first thing I did, obviously I just created the intake form. Let's look at permissions. And permissions are under web form. And you can see I already pulled in some things. But if under form settings, and here I just want to be really sure that this is only for staff or people who have logins. So I'm going to uncheck anonymous. If this was a form that was a public form that you want folks that don't have logins to the database, you would definitely turn this on so that they can enter on it. But I don't want folks outside the organization to turn it on because I'm going to have them do lookups, allow to do lookups and searches on the form. So I just have the authenticated user. That authenticated user just means they have a login regardless of their permissions, because that's just the way this form is going to be used in the organization. So I'm going to click Save. Another thing I may want to do is just set up the emails so that the appropriate staff get notified when an intake is created. So here, and I'm not going to send the intake to the person I'm talking to because that's sort of weird. I'm going to send it to just staff. So in this case, I would just click on the emails tab underneath the web forms, and I could enter the email addresses here by just typing who it's going to be. So I'm going to type as for Alice, and I also want to send it to Natalie. Right, so maybe you can add as many folks as you want here by just putting a comma, space, and then continue adding the email addresses, and then you click Add. And in this case, since it's just a notification, I can don't have to do anything. It's just defaulted. There's a form, PTP intake. There's an intake form coming in, and it doesn't really matter. And then these are just all values. These are just fields here that tell you what was on the form. So that's all that's there. And so folks get notified. Super simple. I'm going to save those email settings so that anytime the form is done. The other thing about the form settings is that, you can just leave it here. You can send folks to a page, but since this is internal, I just want to reload the page if they want to keep entering. So I can just leave it as is and not do anything here. Or because I don't even need a thank you, I can just say no redirect, just reload the page. You can do that as well. But I'm just going to leave it here so folks who are entering know that it actually happened. There's already going to be a link there that says to go back and create another. You can do it again. So just so folks know, hey, it did go through. So I'm going to leave it there and hit save. So that takes care of permissions. That takes care of sending the email. And now let's take a look at the fields. So just to show you how I did the fields, brought in the PowerBase fields, I clicked on Civi CRM. I checked the enable box, and I only have two contacts here. I have the individual that I am talking to, doing the intake for, and maybe because they may have some work issues, I want to collect the employer or the organization that they're part of, and then I have an activity, the helpline intake. So let's take a look at what I have under the contact info. That's just individual. Now here, I did check existing contact. Since this is internal, I'm going to allow doing searches on the form so that folks can look them up. And what it will do is it'll pull up, if there's a match, it'll pull up that person's information and load the contact information about them. And I can edit it if needed right there on the screen. Otherwise, it'll allow you also to create a new contact if that person doesn't exist. So it's almost like doing a search right in the form. So I'm pulling the information I want. First name, I just clicked on the things I wanted. Again, the matching rule is going to be important here. So I'm using our default, most super strictest rule. I just am enabling a couple things in here, like the pronouns. I'm grabbing the address. And in this case, I'm going to use the home address because this is internal. I want to update any address if possible. Otherwise, just add it. Got the phone, home phone, got the email. And that's basically it for the contact information for now. And then I'm going to grab the employer. And this is just an organization type. And I just change the label to employer or organization. And also, I want to make sure that I'm not duplicating that. So I'm going to also click on existing contact so I can look at the organization. And again, I can look at it by name. I want to make sure I have the default matching rule, and I'm just matching only on name and our default rules. So I just want the name, and maybe I'll want the address. If they have it, I'll grab it. And that's about it. And then the relationship I can create the relationship on the fly. So I opened up the relationship fields. This is going to be relationship to the contact, employer of. There you go. It's going to create that right away. So that takes care of contact and employer. And that's why I have two contacts. And now I'm going to create the activity. Now, in this one, I like clicking on the link to view web form submission and putting that link in the activity details of the activity so that I can just click on that and look at the form if I needed to. I'm going to make sure I'm using the helpline intake so I know which activity, and I'm only going to put it in, like it lets you put it to multiple. I only want that activity to be attached to the contact person, so the individual who I'm talking with. Everything else I just sort of left as is. One thing I did do, and you don't have to do this, but I decided to check the activity dates because sometimes maybe maybe you can't get to it right away and you're going to enter it later or the day after and you're scribbling things down with paper. Who knows? So I'm going to put the activity date there. So it'll default to the current date, like today's date. Otherwise, you can enter the date that you actually met with the individual. And then I decided to attach it to the campaign called Helpline Program. And then in the activity, I'm going to just open up all the fields that I want to ask questions for. All right. So that's basically that for now. So that just gets the fields I want. So I'm going to save the settings. So you can see here, it's just going to throw things in its own way. the way it wants. And what I'm going to do right now, we're going to work with these existing contacts because notice this value. Existing contact means whoever's logged in. I don't want that to be me logged in or whoever that staff is. So we have to do some fixing. But I'm going to make sure first that I have the required field. So while I'm here, I'm just going to click on the required field. So definitely first name, last name. For folks that are doing the intake, I want to make sure I'm grabbing the information I need. I need at least a phone number. They may or may not have an email, but I know our folks have phone numbers. I'm going to grab that. Organization, I am not going to require that because maybe they don't. And it has nothing to do with the organization, so I'm not going to require any of that. I'm not going to require pronouns. The activity date, yes, I want to know. That's got to be required. It will default to now. And then there's going to be questions. So I'm going to put down the assistance that's needed. The issue impact is basically that. And then I want some details here. So I'm going to require some additional details because that staff puts that in there. And then comments is just whatever they want. So let's just leave it at that. And then let's hit save. And let's take a look at the form. So right now it's not perfect, right? Notice it's right now it's loading my name because that's the existing contact. So we're going to fix this. We're going to fix these searches. That's what these existing contacts are. So let's do that piece first before we start moving things around. I'm going to go to the web form and let's edit this existing contact. And I'm going to click edit because that's the search field. So here I may fix this and say search for existing contact. In this case, because I want it to be dynamic, I want it to sort of do an autocomplete. What that means, if they find it, fill in anything that I am, the fields that are available with information that are there. So in this case, we're going to say choose for existing. If it's not there, they'll be created new. And here, right now, it's just going to show the name, but there could be more than one person. So I want to make sure I expose other fields that will help me identify if this is the proper person. So I may grab the email, the city, the state, the street. I just want to make sure I got the right person and there's a phone number. So those help identify who's there. So that's what I'm going to do with that. But then there's some interesting things down here that you want to deal with. And here it's like set the default contact from current user. And I'm not going to do that because the current user is the person who's logged in entering that form. So I'm not going to do that. And since it's internal, the person can look up, staff can look up anybody. So I'm just going to leave it, enforcing permissions, and I'm going to click save. I'm also going to do that same thing for the employer organization because I have a lookup field there too. So again, it's just to limit any kind of, or minimize any kind of duplication, even if you use acronyms. Sometimes it's good just to do a quick lookup. So I'm going to say search for existing employer or organization, just so folks know what they're looking for. Again, it's an autocomplete, which we want there. And again, maybe you need more than just the organization name. Maybe you need the, again, I was only asking for certain things, street address and postal code. So that may be the only way I decipher who that is. And again, here, everything is just, there's none. It's already set for none. And again, they can look up anything, anything you want. Now you can limit it only just to organization fields, and that may be helpful. Otherwise, you could just leave it the way it is. And I'm going to hit save. So that will take care of that. And if I look at the form now, if I go to view, note my name is no longer there. So if I start looking, so I could just sort of test this. If I'm in here and I start looking up Alice, notice there's a lot of Alice's, right? And maybe I want this Alice Stewart. Notice, and if Alice doesn't exist here, if that person doesn't exist, they just click create new and it just creates a blank form and you just enter the fields. Otherwise, I can go like this. Oh, this is the Alice I want. And if I do that, notice it's going to fill in the fields that I've exposed. So that's sort of cool. And then I can go in and change it if I want. It's a good way of testing that. Otherwise, they would just go in. You could just start entering, or you could just, if you can't find them, if they're not in that list, you can go ahead and I got to make that more because there's a lot of, you got to give it more information here. Otherwise, you just say create new and it's a blank and you go ahead and just enter the information you want. Okay. So that works there. It's the same thing with employer. You could look for something that's existing. I don't know what I have in here. I may have school East. You can see if I put East High, it'll just put in some information. Okay. So at least that's working. Now note where these fields are. So then the next thing I want to do is, that's the search. So that's the caveat is, like, you don't really want people outside or anonymous folks looking up your database, things in your database. So that's why this is really good for more internal. I'm going to do a couple more things here. I'm not going to get too crazy with this because there's going to be plenty more time to do that. But you can start moving things around. And one thing I'm going to do is I'm going to move this activity date all the way up at the top because it's probably the first thing that I want folks to enter. All right, and I'm going to, and I may move around the pronouns because I want the pronoun to go with the person, right? So I want this to go with the after the last name. And there we go. And I'm going to hit save. And if I hit view, you can see now they have to enter. The date is already filled in. If it was a previous date, they need to enter the other date. So just like in the other screencasts, you could do more with this. You could change the language, you could change the labels, and there'll be other screencasts that will do so you can enter that information. So that's basically how you can start intake form. You don't have to theme it if you don't want. You could use a theme, but they already have it here. What you could do, and I'm going to just add one more bit here, is I'm going to grab this node. This is the node ID. I'm going to grab it with the thing, and maybe what I want to do is add it to the menu here. And here's one thing. You can go to Administer, Custom Data and Screens, and if you go to the Navigation menu, I can add the intake menu item here. You know, I can create another top menu, but in this case, I'm just going to call it intake form. Whoops. Just to show you this is sort of helpful for staff. Since it's, you just need the relative URL, just the node. That's all you need. It knows it's in your database. I'm just put it at the top level so it appears on this top. And then I'm just going to leave the permissions as is and hit save. This just means they have to have access to the database. I can click save. And now you can see there's the intake form. And if I open that up, I can actually get right to the form and they can just start entering away. So again, there's a lot of work you could do with this. I'm just going to leave it for now. There's other screencasts to show you how to make this all pretty.